Maria Santos pushed the heavy cleaning cart down the long hospital corridor, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The wheels wobbled slightly, making a rhythmic sound that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over the past 18 months. At 52 years old, she had calloused hands that told stories of hard work, and tired eyes that held secrets no one at St. Mary's General Hospital bothered to ask about. The early morning shift was always the quietest. Most patients were still asleep, and the day staff hadn't arrived yet. Maria preferred it this way. Less people meant fewer stares, fewer whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she walked by, and fewer reminders that she was just the cleaning lady to everyone who passed her in the hallways. She stopped outside room 314 and knocked gently before entering. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, was awake and staring out the window at the gray dawn sky. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," Maria said softly, not wanting to startle her. "I'm here to clean your bathroom." Mrs. Peterson turned and smiled. She was one of the few patients who always acknowledged Maria's presence. "Oh, hello, dear. You're here early today." "Same time as always," Maria replied, gathering her cleaning supplies. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Better. Thank you for asking. My granddaughter is coming to visit today. I haven't seen her in 2 years." Mrs. Peterson's eyes brightened with excitement. Maria nodded as she entered the small bathroom attached to the room. She had learned that sometimes patients just needed someone to listen, even if that someone was just the person who cleaned their toilets. As she scrubbed the fixtures and mopped the floor, Mrs. Peterson continued talking about her granddaughter, about how proud she was of the young woman's achievements. When Maria finished cleaning, she paused by Mrs. Peterson's bed. "I hope you have a wonderful visit with your granddaughter," she said sincerely. "Thank you, dear. You're very kind." Mrs. Peterson hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Have you been working here long?" "About 1.5 years," Maria answered, already moving toward the door. "You do such thorough work. I've noticed how you take care of things others might miss. That takes dedication." Maria felt a warm flush of appreciation. Compliments were rare in her line of work. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. That means a lot." As she wheeled her cart to the next room, Maria couldn't help but think about dedication. If Mrs. Peterson only knew about the kind of dedication Maria had shown in another life, in another world that seemed impossibly far away from these hospital hallways. The next few rooms were routine cleanings. Empty rooms between patients, quick touch-ups in occupied rooms where patients were either sleeping or too absorbed in their phones or television to notice her presence. Maria moved efficiently, her movements practiced and automatic after so many months of the same routine. It was in room 320 where she encountered her first real challenge of the day. Mr. Rodriguez, a middle-aged man recovering from appendix surgery, was clearly having a bad morning. His breakfast tray sat untouched on the bedside table, and he was arguing loudly with someone on his phone. "I don't care what the insurance company says," he shouted into the device. "I'm missing work, my bills are piling up, and now they're telling me this procedure isn't fully covered." Maria tried to clean quietly around his outburst, but Mr. Rodriguez noticed her, and his frustration found a new target. "And now they send the cleaning lady in here while I'm trying to handle important business," he said, not bothering to cover the phone. "Can't this wait?" Maria looked up from where she was organizing her supplies. "I can come back later if you prefer, sir." No, just be quick about it, okay? Some of us have real problems to deal with." The words stung more than Maria let show. Real problems. She wondered what Mr. Rodriguez would think if he knew about the real problems she had faced, the real challenges she had overcome, and the real service she had given to her country. But she simply nodded and continued her work in silence. As she cleaned his bathroom, Maria could hear Mr. Rodriguez continuing his angry phone conversation. His frustration was understandable. Medical bills and insurance complications were genuinely stressful. But his dismissive attitude toward her work, toward her as a person, was something she encountered regularly. To most people in this hospital, she was invisible until she was inconvenient. After finishing Mr. Rodriguez's room, Maria took a short break in the supply closet. It was barely larger than a bathroom itself, lined with shelves of cleaning products, toilet paper, and fresh linens. She sat on an overturned bucket and rubbed her temples, trying to push away the familiar feeling of being overlooked and undervalued. Her eyes fell on her right hand, specifically on the simple silver ring she wore on her middle finger. Most people didn't notice it, or if they did, they assumed it was just costume jewelry. The ring was adorned with a small purple heart-shaped stone that caught the light when she moved her hands. To anyone else, it might look like something bought at a department store or inherited from a grandmother. But Maria knew the truth about that ring. She had earned it through sacrifice, through pain, through a moment in her life when everything changed forever. The Purple Heart wasn't just decorative. It was a symbol, a recognition, a piece of her history that she carried every day even though no one else understood its significance. She remembered the day she had bought the ring, 3 years after leaving the army. She couldn't afford the traditional Purple Heart jewelry sold at military stores, but she found this simple ring at a pawn shop. The owner didn't know what the Purple Heart meant to her, but he could see it was important and gave her a discount. Special occasion, he had asked as he wrapped it in tissue paper. Something like that, Maria had replied, not ready to share the story behind her need for that symbol. Now, sitting in the hospital supply closet, Maria twisted the ring around her finger, a habit she had developed when she felt overwhelmed or forgotten. The movement reminded her of who she really was, beyond the uniform she wore now, beyond the job title that seemed to define her entire existence in this place. The supply closet door opened suddenly, startling Maria from her thoughts. Janet Hawkins, the floor supervisor, stood in the doorway with her usual stern expression. "Maria, you're behind schedule. Room 325 has been waiting for 20 minutes. I'm sorry, I was just nothing. We have standards to maintain here. Patients expect clean facilities, and the administration expects efficiency. You can't afford to waste time." Janet's tone was sharp and condescending. She was a woman in her early 40s who had worked her way up from housekeeping to supervisor over the course of 15 years. Maria suspected that Janet's harsh attitude toward the cleaning staff came from her own insecurities about her position in the hospital hierarchy. "I understand. It won't happen again," Maria said, standing up and gathering her resolve along with her cleaning supplies. "See that it doesn't. The hospital is under new management review, and they're looking closely at every department's performance. We can't afford any weak links." As Janet walked away, Maria felt the familiar weight of being judged solely on her current circumstances. Janet saw a middle-aged cleaning woman who was falling behind on her duties. She didn't see a veteran who had once led a supply convoy through hostile territory, who had made split-second decisions that saved lives, who had earned recognition for courage under fire. Maria wheeled her cart toward room 325, her mind wandering back to those days when her decisions mattered, when her skills were valued, when she wore a different uniform that commanded respect rather than invisibility. The contrast between then and now was sometimes overwhelming. Room 325 housed Mr. Williams, an elderly veteran who was recovering from pneumonia. As soon as Maria entered, she noticed the small American flag pin on his hospital gown and the military bearing he maintained even while lying in bed. "Good morning, sir," Maria said, unconsciously straightening her posture slightly. "Morning, miss. Sorry you had to wait. I was just finishing up a call with my son." "No problem at all. How are you feeling today?" Mr. Williams studied her face for a moment, something many patients didn't bother to do. "Better. Thanks for asking. Been in here too long already. Ready to get home to my garden." As Maria began cleaning his bathroom, Mr. Williams continued talking. "Spent 30 years in the Army myself. Retired as a master sergeant. Hard to get used to civilian life sometimes, you know? Everything moves different out here." Maria's hand paused on the toilet brush. She glanced back at Mr. Williams, who was looking at her with keen, intelligent eyes. "I imagine it would be a big adjustment," she said carefully. "Oh, it was. Took me years to find my footing. The structure, the purpose, the brotherhood. You don't realize how much you depend on those things until they're gone." There was something in his tone that made Maria suspect he might understand more than most people about difficult transitions. She finished cleaning and came back into the main room to empty his wastebasket. "Can I ask you something, miss?" Mr. Williams said as she worked. "Of course. You carry yourself different than most folks. Got a way of moving that seems familiar. You ever serve?" The question caught Maria off guard. In 18 months of working at the hospital, no one had ever asked her that. No one had ever looked closely enough to notice anything about her beyond her job title. Maria hesitated. She had learned to be cautious about sharing her military background. Some people reacted with disbelief. She didn't fit their image of what a veteran should look like. Others responded with pity or awkward attempts at gratitude that made her uncomfortable. Most simply didn't care. Yes, sir. Army. 8 years. Mr. Williams nodded with understanding. Thought so. Combat. Again, Maria paused. This conversation was moving into territory she rarely explored with strangers. But something about Mr. Williams's direct, respectful manner made her feel safe to share a little more. 2 deployments. Afghanistan. Thank you for your service, he said simply, without the usual awkwardness that accompanied those words from civilians. Coming from a fellow veteran, the phrase carried different weight. Thank you for yours, Maria replied. What did you do over there? Supply and logistics. Convoy operations mostly. Mr. Williams whistled low. Dangerous work. Those roads were no joke. Maria felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The roads. The constant vigilance. The moment when everything went wrong, and her life changed forever. She pushed the memories away and focused on finishing her cleaning tasks. Well, I should let you rest, she said, moving toward the door. Hey, miss. Mr. Williams called after her. She turned back. Thanks for what you did over there. And thanks for the good work you're doing here. Takes all kinds of service to keep the world running. Maria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It had been so long since someone acknowledged her military service, let alone connected it to her current work. Thank you, sir. That means everything. As she left room 325, Maria felt a conflicting mix of emotions. Mr. Williams's recognition felt wonderful, but it also highlighted how invisible she had become to everyone else. She was the same person who had served overseas, who had faced danger and made difficult decisions, who had sacrificed for her country. But in this hospital, she was just someone who cleaned toilets. The rest of her morning shift passed without incident. She cleaned rooms, restocked supplies, and endured the usual mixture of indifference and occasional rudeness from staff and patients alike. By the time her shift ended at noon, Maria was physically and emotionally drained. She changed out of her uniform in the employee locker room, a cramped space in the basement that smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. As she hung up her work clothes, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror mounted on the wall. She looked tired, older than her 52 years, worn down by the daily grind of a job that felt increasingly meaningless. But as she gathered her purse and prepared to leave, Maria caught sight of her Purple Heart ring again. Despite everything, despite the way she was treated and the way she sometimes felt about her current circumstances, that ring reminded her of who she really was. She had survived worse than cleaning toilets and dealing with dismissive supervisors. She had faced actual life and death situations and emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring another early morning shift, another 8 hours of being overlooked and undervalued. But Maria Santos was still standing, still working, still carrying the strength and dignity she had earned through service to her country. Even if no one else could see it, she knew the truth about who she was. And sometimes, just sometimes, that had to be enough. 3 weeks had passed since Maria's conversation with Mr. Williams, and the memory of his recognition still brought warmth to her heart during particularly difficult days. Unfortunately, today was shaping up to be one of those days. The hospital was busier than usual, with several emergency admissions overnight, and the cleaning staff was already behind schedule before the morning shift had properly begun. Maria arrived at 6 a.m. to find chaos in the employee break room. 2 of her co-workers had called in sick, leaving only 3 people to cover the work usually done by 5. Janet Hawkins was pacing back and forth, her stress level clearly elevated as she tried to redistribute the workload. Maria, you'll need to cover floors 3 and 4 today, Janet announced without looking up from her clipboard. Emma and Sarah are both out sick, so we're short-staffed. Both floors? Maria asked, calculating the impossibility of the task in her head. Each floor normally required 4 hours of thorough cleaning, and that was with a full crew. You'll have to work faster and skip some of the non-essential tasks. Focus on the bathrooms and high-traffic areas. The administration doesn't want to hear excuses about staffing shortages. Maria nodded, knowing that arguing would only make the situation worse. She gathered double the usual amount of supplies and began loading 2 cleaning carts. The work ahead would be exhausting, but she had faced impossible odds before in much more dangerous circumstances. Her first stop was room 301, where she encountered Dr. Rebecca Chun, a young resident who was clearly having her own stressful morning. Dr. Chun was frantically searching through paperwork while talking on her phone, trying to coordinate care for a patient who was being transferred from another hospital. "Excuse me," Maria said softly, not wanting to interrupt but needing to clean the room. Dr. Chun looked up with irritation. "Can't this wait? I'm dealing with an emergency admission. I'm sorry, but I have 2 floors to cover today, and I'm already behind schedule." "Fine, just be quick about it," Dr. Chun said, turning back to her phone call. No, the patient needs to be in the ICU, not the general ward. Did you not read the transfer notes?" As Maria began cleaning, she couldn't help but overhear the conversation. Dr. Chun was trying to coordinate care for a patient with multiple injuries from a car accident, but there seemed to be confusion about the severity of the case and the appropriate level of care needed. "The patient has a traumatic brain injury and possible internal bleeding," Dr. Chun was saying, her voice rising with frustration. "This is not a general admission case." Maria paused in her cleaning. During her time as a logistics coordinator in the Army, she had worked closely with medical personnel in field hospitals. She recognized the signs of a communication breakdown that could have serious consequences for patient care. Dr. Chin ended her phone call with obvious frustration and immediately dialed another number. As she waited for someone to answer, Maria noticed the young doctor's hands were shaking slightly. "Dr. Chun," Maria said quietly. "What?" Dr. Chin snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I'm just having a really difficult morning. I couldn't help but overhear about the patient transfer. Have you tried calling the receiving unit directly instead of going through the main hospital line? Sometimes the communication gets lost in the chain." Dr. Chin looked surprised that Maria had been following the conversation and even more surprised that she was offering advice. I tried that, but they said they were full." "Did you mention the traumatic brain injury specifically? Sometimes the person taking the call doesn't understand the urgency unless you use the exact medical terminology." "How do you know about medical terminology?" Dr. Chin asked, studying Maria's face for the first time. Maria hesitated. She wasn't supposed to give medical advice. She was just the cleaning lady. But she could see that Dr. Chun was overwhelmed and the patient needed proper care. "I have some experience with emergency medical situations," Maria said carefully. "In the Army, I worked with field medics and evacuation procedures. The key is making sure everyone understands the critical nature of the case." Dr. Chin's expression shifted from surprise to curiosity. "You were in the Army?" "Yes, ma'am. 8 years. I handled logistics for medical evacuations among other things." That's actually really helpful. Let me try calling the ICU directly and using the specific terminology you suggested." Maria watched as Dr. Chun made the call, this time speaking with more authority and using precise medical language to describe the patient's condition. Within minutes, she had secured a bed in the ICU and coordinated the transfer. "Thank you," Dr. Chun said after hanging up. "That made all the difference. I'm still learning how to navigate the hospital systems, and sometimes I forget that being specific and direct works better than being polite." "You're doing great, doctor. It's a lot to manage." Dr. Chin paused, looking at Maria with new interest. "What did you do in the Army exactly?" "Supply and logistics coordination. I managed the movement of personnel, equipment, and medical supplies. Sometimes I worked directly with medical teams during evacuations from combat zones." "That sounds like incredibly important work. How did you end up?" Dr. Chin gestured around the hospital room, clearly wanting to ask how someone with that background ended up cleaning toilets, but not knowing how to phrase the question politely. Maria understood the unasked question. She got it a lot from the few people who bothered to learn about her background. "Life takes unexpected turns sometimes," she said simply. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. It's just that you clearly have skills and experience that seem underutilized here." "Every job has value," Maria replied, though she appreciated Dr. Chin's recognition of her capabilities. "And sometimes you have to take what's available while you figure out the next step." Dr. Chin nodded thoughtfully. "Well, if you ever want to talk about opportunities in hospital logistics or administration, I'd be happy to introduce you to some people. Your military experience would be really valuable in those departments. Maria felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in months, hope. I would appreciate that, Dr. Chun. Thank you. Thank you for helping me this morning. I was getting overwhelmed, and you really came through. As Dr. Chun left the room, Maria continued her cleaning with a slightly lighter heart. It felt good to use her knowledge and skills to help someone, even in a small way. She had almost forgotten what it was like to have her experience valued and respected. The rest of the morning passed quickly as Maria worked to cover her expanded territory. She was moving at double speed, taking shortcuts where she could while still maintaining the quality standards the hospital required. By the time she reached the 4th floor, she was exhausted and running nearly 2 hours behind schedule. It was on the 4th floor that Maria encountered General Patricia Morrison for the first time, though she didn't know who the woman was at that moment. Maria was rushing to clean room 410 when she nearly collided with a tall, dignified woman in civilian clothes who was walking slowly down the hallway, reading something on her phone. "Oh, excuse me," Maria said, stopping her cart abruptly to avoid hitting the woman. The woman looked up with sharp, intelligent eyes. She appeared to be in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and an air of quiet authority. Despite wearing civilian clothes, a simple navy blue pantsuit, there was something about her posture and bearing that reminded Maria of the senior officers she had known in the army. "No harm done," the woman said with a slight smile. "You look like you're having a busy day." "Yes, ma'am. Short staffed today, so I'm trying to cover extra territory." The woman nodded with understanding. "I've been there. Sometimes you have to do more than your share to keep things running smoothly." There was something in her tone that suggested she spoke from experience, but Maria didn't have time to think about it. She was already falling further behind schedule, and Janet would be furious if patients started complaining about dirty rooms. "I should get back to work," Maria said, starting to push her cart forward. "Of course. Don't let me keep you." As Maria entered room 410, she noticed through the open door that the woman remained in the hallway, observing the hospital staff as they went about their duties. There was something methodical about the way she watched people, as if she was conducting some kind of assessment. Room 410 was occupied by Mrs. Foster, an elderly woman who was recovering from gallbladder surgery. She was one of Maria's favorite patients, always kind, always grateful for the work Maria did to keep her room clean and comfortable. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Foster said warmly. "You look tired today." "Just a busy morning, Mrs. Foster." "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. The nurses say I might be able to go home tomorrow." Mrs. Foster paused, watching Maria work. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. You always do such careful work. Even when you're clearly rushed like today, you don't cut corners. That's unusual. Most people, when they're under pressure, they start taking shortcuts." Maria looked up from where she was scrubbing the bathroom sink. "I guess I learned early that doing something right the first time saves problems later." "Where did you learn that?" "The Army," Maria answered without thinking, then immediately wondered if she should have been more vague. "You served?" Mrs. Foster's eyes lit up with interest. "My late husband was in the Navy for 25 years. He always said the military taught him the value of doing things properly, no matter how small the task." "Your husband sounds like a wise man." "He was. He used to say that character shows in how you handle the little things, not just the big dramatic moments. Watching you work, I think he would have liked you." Maria felt a lump forming in her throat. Mrs. Foster's words touched something deep inside her, a recognition of the principles and values that had guided her through military service and continued to guide her now, even in very different circumstances. "Thank you, Mrs. Foster. That means more to me than you know. Where did you serve, if you don't mind me asking?" "Afghanistan. 2 deployments. I was in logistics and supply operations." "My goodness, that must have been dangerous work." Maria paused in her cleaning. Most people, when they learned about her military service, either thanked her awkwardly and changed the subject or began asking inappropriate questions about combat and violence. Mrs. Foster seemed genuinely interested in understanding her experience. "It had its challenges," Maria said carefully. "But I was proud to serve with my unit. We did important work supporting the mission." "I'm sure you did. My husband always said the support personnel were the backbone of any operation." The people who keep everything running behind the scenes don't always get the recognition they deserve. As Maria finished cleaning Mrs. Foster's room, she thought about those words. The people who keep everything running behind the scenes. That described her military service, but it also described her current job. She was still supporting important work, still keeping things running smoothly, still serving others in her own way. When Maria left room 410, she was surprised to see the distinguished woman from the hallway still nearby, now talking quietly with Dr. Williams, the chief of staff. They were standing near the nurse's station, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation about hospital operations. As Maria pushed her cart past them, she couldn't help but overhear part of their conversation. The efficiency ratings have improved, but staff morale is still a concern, Dr. Williams was saying. I can see why, the woman replied. I've been observing the way people interact here. There seems to be a disconnect between different levels of staff. The cleaning crew, for instance, they're clearly working hard, but they seem to be treated as invisible by much of the medical staff. It's a common issue in hospitals. The hierarchy can be pronounced. That's counterproductive. In my experience, every member of a team contributes to the mission's success. When you treat people as disposable or unimportant, you lose valuable insights and create inefficiencies. Maria slowed her pace slightly, intrigued by the woman's perspective. It was rare to hear someone in what appeared to be a leadership position talking about the value of all staff members. I assume you have recommendations for improvement? Dr. Williams asked. Several, but I'd like to observe a bit longer before making formal suggestions. Sometimes the best insights come from watching how people actually work, not just reading reports and policies. As Maria moved out of earshot, she found herself hoping that whoever this woman was, her influence might lead to positive changes in the hospital culture. The idea that someone in authority was paying attention to how the support staff was treated gave her a small sense of optimism. The rest of her shift was a blur of activity. Maria managed to complete most of the essential cleaning tasks on both floors, though she had to skip some of the detailed work she would normally do. By the time 2 p.m. arrived, her shift extended due to the additional workload. She was exhausted, and her feet were aching. In the employee locker room, Maria sat on the bench and rubbed her temples. The day had been physically demanding, but it had also been emotionally complex. Her interaction with Dr. Chun had reminded her of the skills and knowledge she possessed beyond her current job description. Mrs. Foster's words had reinforced her sense of purpose and dignity in her work. And the mysterious woman in the hallway had given her hope that someone in authority might actually care about improving conditions for all hospital employees. As she changed out of her uniform, Maria noticed Janet Hawkins entering the locker room with a stern expression. Maria, we need to talk, Janet said, her tone ominous. Maria's heart sank. Despite her best efforts, she knew she hadn't been able to complete every task on her extended assignment. She had prioritized the most important cleaning jobs, but some of the detail work had been sacrificed to the time constraints. I received several complaints today about the quality of cleaning on your floors, Janet continued. I did my best with the workload I was given. 2 floors is really more than one person can handle properly in a single shift. That's not an excuse. Other staff members have managed similar workloads without complaints. Maria knew this wasn't true, but arguing with Janet rarely accomplished anything positive. Instead, she tried a different approach. What specifically were the complaints about? I can make sure to address those areas tomorrow. Room 415 said their bathroom wasn't properly stocked with towels. Room 403 complained that their floor wasn't mopped. Room 407 said their wastebasket wasn't emptied. Maria mentally reviewed her work. She remembered each of those rooms, and she was certain she had completed the basic cleaning tasks. I'm sure I stocked towels and emptied wastebaskets in all the rooms. The floor mopping. I may have missed that in 403 because I was rushing to finish everything. Rushing is not an excuse for sloppy work. The hospital's reputation depends on maintaining consistent standards. I understand that, but when we're short-staffed, something has to give. I prioritized patient safety and basic sanitation, but I couldn't do everything to the usual standard. Janet's expression hardened. If you can't handle the responsibilities of the job, perhaps you should consider whether this position is right for you. The threat was clear, and Maria felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She needed this job despite its challenges. At 52, with a gap in her civilian work history, finding another position would be difficult. I can handle the responsibilities, Maria said quietly. I just need realistic expectations about what can be accomplished when we're significantly short-staffed. The expectations are what they are. If you can't meet them, there are other people who would be grateful for the opportunity. As Janet walked away, Maria felt a familiar sense of frustration and powerlessness. She had given her best effort under difficult circumstances, but it wasn't good enough. The skills and experience that had once been valued were now irrelevant. She was judged solely on her ability to clean rooms quickly and quietly, and even then, the standards seemed designed to ensure failure. Sitting alone in the locker room, Maria looked down at her purple heart ring and twisted it around her finger. Tomorrow would bring another day of challenges, another opportunity to prove herself worthy of a job that didn't seem to value her worthiness at all. But she would keep showing up, keep working hard, keep maintaining her dignity even when others couldn't see past her job title. She had survived worse than Janet Hawkins and hospital politics. She would survive this too. The following Monday brought unexpected developments that would change the trajectory of Maria's life at St. Mary's General Hospital. She arrived for her 6 a.m. shift to find the employee break room buzzing with unusual energy. Her co-workers were clustered around the bulletin board, speaking in hushed, excited tones. "What's going on?" Maria asked Emma, who had returned from her sick leave with obvious curiosity about the weekend's events. "Some big shot from the state hospital administration was here all weekend doing surprise inspections," Emma whispered. "They say she's some kind of efficiency expert brought in to evaluate our operations." Sarah joined their conversation, her eyes wide with concern. "I heard from Linda in accounting that they're looking at potentially cutting staff or changing procedures. You know how these administrative reviews usually go." Maria felt a chill of anxiety. Budget cuts and efficiency reviews typically meant job losses, and as one of the newer employees in housekeeping, she would likely be among the first to be let go if positions were eliminated. "Did anyone see this inspector?" Maria asked. "Janet mentioned she was some kind of former military person," Emma said. "Apparently very thorough, asking lots of questions about how things operate day to day." The mention of military background sparked Maria's curiosity, but she didn't have time to think about it further. Janet Hawkins appeared in the break room doorway, her expression more stressed than usual. "All right, everyone listen up," Janet announced. "We're going to have continued administrative observation this week, so I want everyone on their best behavior. No shortcuts, no excuses, and absolutely no complaints from patients or medical staff." She turned her gaze directly to Maria. "That especially means you, Santos. After Friday's performance issues, you can't afford any more problems." Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as her co-workers glanced at her. Janet had effectively singled her out in front of the entire morning crew, making it clear that Maria was on thin ice. "I understand," Maria said quietly. "Good. Now let's get to work. And remember, someone is watching everything we do this week." As the group dispersed to begin their shifts, Maria gathered her supplies with a heavy heart. The pressure to perform perfectly while potentially being observed by a critical inspector felt overwhelming. She had been proud of her work quality despite the challenging circumstances, but Janet's public criticism had shaken her confidence. Her first assignment was the pediatric wing, which required special attention to safety protocols and infection control. Maria always enjoyed working in the children's area because it felt more purposeful. Protecting vulnerable young patients from hospital-acquired infections was clearly important work that directly impacted health outcomes. As she began cleaning room 205, which housed 7-year-old Tommy Martinez who was recovering from appendix surgery, Maria noticed the boy was awake and looked frightened. "Good morning, Tommy," Maria said gently. "How are you feeling today?" "My tummy hurts," Tommy said in a small voice. "And I miss my mom." Maria's heart went out to the child. She had learned that Tommy's mother worked 2 jobs and could only visit in the evenings, leaving the boy alone during the long hospital days. "I'm sure she misses you too," Maria said as she began her cleaning routine. "The nurses tell me you're healing really well, which means you'll probably get to go home soon." Really. But you have to keep following the doctor's instructions and taking your medicine." As Maria cleaned, Tommy began talking about his favorite video games and his pet hamster named Captain Whiskers. Maria listened attentively, understanding that sometimes a friendly conversation was as healing as any medical intervention. "Are you a doctor?" Tommy asked suddenly. "No, sweetie. I'm part of the cleaning crew. I make sure everything stays nice and clean so you can get better. That's important too, right? My mom always says germs can make you sicker. Your mom is very smart. Keeping things clean is one of the most important ways to help people heal." Tommy considered this seriously. "So you're like a germ fighter." Maria smiled at the description. "I suppose I am." "That's cool. Like a superhero." "I don't know about superhero," Maria said. But the child's perspective touched her. It had been a long time since someone viewed her work as heroic in any way. As she finished cleaning Tommy's room, Maria reflected on how different her job felt when she focused on its real purpose, protecting patients and supporting their healing, rather than just trying to satisfy arbitrary efficiency metrics and avoid criticism from supervisors. Her next stop was room 210, where she encountered Dr. Chen again. The young resident was reviewing charts with another doctor, and she looked up when Maria entered. "Oh, Maria, perfect timing. I wanted to thank you again for your help last week. The patient transfer went smoothly, and I used your communication strategy with 2 other cases this weekend. It really works." The other doctor, Dr. Peterson, looked curious. "What strategy is that?" "Maria has military experience with medical logistics," Dr. Chen explained. She suggested being very specific about medical terminology when communicating urgency to other departments. "It's made a huge difference in getting appropriate responses." Dr. Peterson turned to Maria with interest. "Military medical logistics? That's fascinating. What branch of service?" "Army, sir. I coordinated supply chains and medical evacuations in Afghanistan." "That must have been incredibly challenging work. How did you end up in hospital housekeeping?" The question hung in the air awkwardly. Maria wasn't sure how to explain the complex series of circumstances that had led her from military logistics to cleaning toilets without sounding like she was making excuses or seeking pity. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," she said diplomatically. Dr. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. "Well, your experience is clearly valuable. Have you considered applying for positions in our logistics or supply chain departments? We're always looking for people with that kind of background." "I've thought about it," Maria said honestly. "But most positions require certifications or recent experience that I don't have." "That's often just a starting point for negotiation," Dr. Chen interjected. "Real-world experience, especially military experience, can be more valuable than classroom training." "I'd be happy to make some introductions if you're interested," Dr. Peterson added. "The hospital is always trying to improve our operational efficiency, and someone with your background might have valuable insights." Maria felt that familiar spark of hope. "I would appreciate that very much, Dr. Peterson." "Great. I'll send you some information about current openings and the people you should speak with." As Maria continued her work, she carried the doctor's encouragement with her like a small flame of possibility. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a different future at the hospital, one where her experience and skills would be valued and utilized. But her optimism was dampened when she reached the administrative wing and encountered the mysterious woman from the previous week. The woman was standing in the hallway outside the hospital administrator's office, reading through a thick folder of documents. She looked up as Maria approached with her cleaning cart. "Good morning," the woman said pleasantly. "We meet again." "Good morning, ma'am," Maria replied, uncertain whether she should engage in conversation or simply continue with her work. "I've been observing hospital operations this week," the woman continued. "I'm curious about your perspective on how things run around here." Maria felt a spike of anxiety. This was clearly the inspector everyone had been talking about, and Janet had made it clear that any negative comments could jeopardize her job. "I think the hospital does good work caring for patients," Maria said carefully. The woman smiled slightly, as if she recognized the diplomatic non-answer. "That's certainly true. But I'm interested in the operational side of things. How efficient are the systems? How well do different departments work together? How supported do staff members feel in their roles?" The questions were specific and penetrating, suggesting this woman had considerable experience evaluating organizational effectiveness. Maria realized she was being given an opportunity to share her observations, but she also knew the risks of speaking honestly. The medical staff is very dedicated, Maria said, trying to thread the needle between honesty and job security. Everyone works hard to take care of patients. And the support staff? Do they feel valued and supported in their work? This was more dangerous territory. Maria thought about Janet's public criticism, the impossible workloads, the way she was treated as invisible by much of the medical staff. There are always challenges in any workplace, she said diplomatically. The woman studied Maria's face carefully. You strike me as someone who has experience with organizational management. Am I correct? The question surprised Maria. How could this stranger have picked up on her leadership background? I have some management experience, yes ma'am. Military, yes ma'am. Army. I coordinated logistics operations and supervised supply teams. The woman's expression shifted noticeably. What rank did you achieve? Staff sergeant, ma'am. And you're currently working in housekeeping? Maria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Yes, ma'am. Sometimes you have to take what's available. The woman was quiet for a long moment, studying Maria with intense focus. What's your assessment of this hospital's operational efficiency? The direct question demanded a direct answer. Maria made a quick decision to trust this woman's apparent authority and answer honestly. The medical care is excellent, but there are significant inefficiencies in communication between departments and allocation of support resources. Staff morale and support services is low, which affects overall performance. Can you be more specific? Housekeeping is consistently understaffed, which creates quality issues and employee stress. Medical staff often doesn't communicate effectively with support departments, leading to duplicated efforts and missed priorities. And there's a cultural hierarchy that prevents valuable input from experienced support staff from being heard or utilized. The woman nodded slowly. Those are very astute observations. What would you recommend to address these issues? Maria thought carefully before answering. Better integration between departments. Regular communication meetings that include support staff representatives. Realistic staffing levels based on actual workload analysis. And recognition programs that acknowledge the contributions of all employees, not just medical staff. Excellent recommendations. They show real understanding of organizational dynamics. The woman paused. Can I ask your name? Maria Santos, ma'am. Ms. Santos, I'm General Patricia Morrison, retired. I've been brought in by the State Hospital Administration to conduct an operational assessment of this facility. Maria felt her heart skip a beat. A general. She had been talking casually with a general officer, and, worse, she had essentially criticized her current employer to someone who would be reporting directly to senior administration. I apologize, General Morrison, Maria said quickly. I didn't realize who you were. No apology needed, Staff Sergeant Santos. Your observations are exactly what I hoped to hear from someone with your experience and perspective. The use of her military rank was unexpected and deeply moving. It had been years since anyone had addressed her that way, acknowledging her service and the rank she had earned. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to continue this conversation when you have time. Your insights could be very valuable to my assessment. Of course, General. I'm available whenever convenient for you. Excellent. I'll have someone contact you to set up a formal interview. In the meantime, keep doing the outstanding work I've observed. Your professionalism and dedication are evident. As General Morrison walked away, Maria stood in the hallway feeling stunned. A retired general had not only acknowledged her military background, but had actively sought her professional opinion about hospital operations. After months of feeling invisible and undervalued, being recognized for her expertise and experience was overwhelming. But Maria's elation was short-lived. As she continued her cleaning rounds, she couldn't shake the worry about what would happen when Janet learned about her conversation with General Morrison. If the general's assessment led to changes in hospital operations, and if those changes were traced back to Maria's input, there could be serious repercussions for her job security. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Hope and anxiety battled in her mind as she went through the motions of her cleaning duties. She had been given an unprecedented opportunity to contribute meaningfully to improving the hospital's operations, but she also knew that change often came with costs, and those costs were usually paid by the people with the least power to protect themselves. As her shift ended, Maria couldn't help but Wonder if her conversation with General Morrison would turn out to be the opportunity she had been hoping for, or the beginning of the end of her employment at St. Mary's General Hospital. Either way, there was no turning back now. The general had seen her potential, and Maria knew she couldn't continue to hide behind the safety of invisibility. For better or worse, she was about to discover what happened when someone in authority finally noticed the purple heart ring on her finger and understood what it represented. Wednesday morning brought news that would forever change Maria's life at St. Mary's General Hospital. She arrived at work to find an envelope waiting for her in her employee mailbox, official hospital stationery with her name typed on the front. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, fearing it might be a disciplinary notice or even a termination letter following her candid conversation with General Morrison. Instead, she found a formal request to attend a meeting at 2 p.m. that day with Dr. Williams, the Chief of Staff, and General Morrison. The brief note mentioned that they wanted to discuss operational improvements and potential career opportunities with her. Maria read the letter 3 times, hardly believing what she was seeing. Emma noticed her stunned expression in the break room. "Bad news?" she asked with concern. "I'm not sure," Maria replied honestly. "I've been called to a meeting with the Chief of Staff and the inspector who's been observing the hospital this week." "Oh no," Sarah said, overhearing. "That doesn't sound good. Did Janet file a complaint about Friday's incident?" Maria hadn't considered that possibility, and it sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. "I don't know. I guess I'll find out this afternoon." Janet Hawkins chose that moment to enter the break room, and her expression immediately darkened when she saw Maria holding the official letter. "What's that?" Janet demanded. "A meeting request from administration," Maria answered truthfully. Janet's face flushed with anger. "I wasn't informed about any meeting." "Let me see that." Maria reluctantly handed over the letter. As Janet read it, her expression grew increasingly stormy. "This is highly irregular," Janet said. "Any meetings with housekeeping staff should go through me as the department supervisor. I'm going to call Dr. Williams's office immediately to clarify this situation." As Janet stormed out of the break room, Maria's co-workers looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Being called to administration was rarely good news for hospital support staff, and having it happen without their immediate supervisor's knowledge made it even more ominous. The morning shift dragged by slowly as Maria tried to focus on her work while anxiety gnawed at her stomach. Every time she passed a clock, she calculated how many hours remained until the mysterious meeting. By noon, she was fighting nausea and had to take several breaks to calm her nerves. At 1:45 p.m., Maria changed out of her cleaning uniform and into the best clothes she had with her, a simple navy blue blouse and black slacks she kept in her locker for emergencies. She took a moment to look at herself in the small mirror, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Her purple heart ring caught the light, and she touched it gently for courage. The administrative offices were on the top floor of the hospital, a world away from the basement break rooms and supply closets where Maria spent her days. As she rode the elevator up, she tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. The best-case scenario was that they wanted her input on housekeeping operations. The worst-case scenario was that her conversation with General Morrison had somehow been misinterpreted as insubordination or disloyalty. Dr. Williams's secretary, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Patterson, greeted Maria warmly when she arrived at the outer office. "Miss Santos, they're ready for you. Right through that door." Maria knocked softly and entered to find Dr. Williams and General Morrison seated at a small conference table. To her surprise, there was also a third person present, a woman in her 40s wearing a professional suit who was introduced as Linda Hayes from the State Hospital Administration's Human Resources Department. "Please, have a seat," Dr. Williams said, gesturing to the chair across from them. "Thank you for coming, Maria. I hope we're not taking you away from anything urgent." "Not at all, Dr. Williams. I'm available whenever you need me." General Morrison leaned forward slightly. "Staff Sergeant Santos, I want to start by thanking you for your candid assessment of hospital operations earlier this week. Your insights have been invaluable to my evaluation." The use of her military rank again sent a surge of pride through Maria, but she remained cautious. "I'm glad I could be helpful, General." "Your military background is quite impressive," Linda Hayes interjected, consulting a folder in front of her. 8 years of service, including 2 combat deployments. Logistics coordination, supply chain management, personnel supervision. Purple Heart recipient. Maria's breath caught. How did they know about her Purple Heart? She had never mentioned it to anyone at the hospital. General Morrison noticed her surprise. I hope you don't mind that I did some research into your service record. When I encounter a fellow veteran, especially one with your level of experience, I like to understand their full background. Your military record is exemplary, Dr. Williams added. Which raises an obvious question. How did someone with your qualifications and experience end up in our housekeeping department? Maria had dreaded this moment. She took a deep breath and decided to tell the truth, regardless of how it might sound. When I left the Army, I had some personal challenges that made it difficult to transition into civilian employment immediately. I was dealing with some adjustment issues and needed time to get back on my feet. The housekeeping position was available, and I needed steady work while I figured out my next steps. Linda Hayes nodded understandingly. Many veterans face transition challenges. There's no shame in that. What matters is how you've conducted yourself since being here. And from what I've observed and heard, your performance and professionalism have been consistently excellent. That's why we asked you here today, General Morrison said. Based on my operational assessment, this hospital would benefit significantly from having someone with your background and skills in a position where you can actually utilize them. Dr. Williams opened a different folder. We've reviewed our current staffing needs and identified several positions that would be a much better fit for your qualifications. Our logistics coordination department is expanding, and they need an assistant director with experience in supply chain management and personnel oversight. Maria felt dizzy. Were they offering her a promotion? A completely different job? The position would involve coordinating the movement of medical supplies throughout the hospital, managing vendor relationships, overseeing inventory control, and supervising a team of logistics specialists, Linda Hayes explained. The salary would be significantly higher than your current position, and it would include full management benefits. I don't know what to say, Maria stammered. This is completely unexpected. There's more, General Morrison said with a slight smile. Based on your insights about interdepartmental communication, we're also creating a new position, Operations Integration Coordinator. This person would work to improve communication and cooperation between different hospital departments, identify operational inefficiencies, and implement solutions. We'd like you to consider taking on both roles, Dr. Williams added. The logistics position would be your primary responsibility, but you'd also spend part of your time working on the integration projects. It would be a unique opportunity to have real impact on how this hospital operates. Maria stared at them in amazement. After 18 months of being treated as invisible, of having her skills and experience ignored, they were offering her not one but 2 significant positions that would actually utilize her background. But why? She asked. Why me? And why now? General Morrison's expression grew serious. Because I've watched you work, Staff Sergeant. I've seen how you interact with patients, how you solve problems, how you maintain your professionalism even when you're not being treated with the respect you deserve. Those qualities, combined with your military experience, make you exactly what this hospital needs. Also, Linda Hayes added, the State Hospital Administration is implementing new initiatives to better utilize veteran employees throughout the system. Your case would serve as a model for other facilities. Dr. Williams leaned forward. I have to ask, Maria, why didn't you ever apply for positions that better matched your qualifications? We've had several logistics and administrative openings since you've been here. Maria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Honestly, Dr. Williams, I didn't think anyone would consider me. I was just a cleaning lady. I assumed my military experience wouldn't be valued in a hospital environment, and I was afraid of being rejected. That's exactly the problem we need to fix, General Morrison said firmly. Too many valuable employees are being overlooked because of assumptions and prejudices about job categories. Your situation has opened our eyes to how much talent we might be wasting. Linda Hayes slid a packet of papers across the table. Here are the formal job descriptions and salary information. We'd like you to review everything and let us know your decision by Friday. Maria picked up the packet with trembling hands. The salary figures were more than double what she was currently earning. The job responsibilities read like a perfect match for her military experience. After months of feeling worthless and invisible, she was being offered the opportunity to have real purpose and impact again. "I do need to warn you about one thing," Dr. Williams said carefully. "This kind of promotion across departments sometimes creates tensions with existing supervisors." Janet Hawkins was not pleased when she learned about this meeting. "We've already addressed that situation," General Morrison said firmly. Ms. Hawkins was informed that this decision comes from the highest levels of hospital administration and is not subject to her approval or interference. "What about my current coworkers?" Maria asked, thinking about Emma and Sarah. "I don't want them to think I'm abandoning them." "That's another reason we chose you for these positions," Linda Hayes said warmly. "Your concern for your colleagues shows exactly the kind of leadership attitude we need. Part of your integration coordinator role would be to advocate for improvements in working conditions and staffing levels for all departments, including housekeeping." As the meeting concluded, Maria felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. In the space of 30 minutes, her entire future at the hospital had been transformed. She was being offered not just a better job, but the chance to make a real difference in how the hospital operated and how employees were treated. "We know this is a lot to process," General Morrison said as they stood to leave. "Take your time reviewing everything, but I hope you'll accept. The hospital needs people like you in leadership positions." As Maria walked back to the elevator, she could hardly believe what had just happened. She thought about Mrs. Foster's words about character showing in how you handle the little things. She thought about Tommy Martinez calling her a superhero germ fighter. She thought about Dr. Chun recognizing her knowledge and experience. And she thought about General Morrison seeing past her job title to the person she really was. In the elevator, Maria looked down at her purple heart ring and smiled. For 18 months, she had worn it as a private reminder of who she used to be. Now it seemed like a promise of who she could become again. When she returned to the housekeeping department to finish her shift, Janet Hawkins was waiting for her with a sour expression. "I suppose you think you're pretty clever," Janet said coldly. "Going behind my back to complain to administration about your working conditions." "I didn't complain about anything, Janet. I was asked for my professional opinion, and I gave it honestly." "Professional opinion?" Janet laughed bitterly. "You're a toilet cleaner, not a management consultant." Maria looked at Janet calmly, feeling a new sense of confidence and self-worth. "I'm a veteran with 8 years of military logistics experience, 2 combat deployments, and a Purple Heart. I'm also someone who has spent 18 months learning every aspect of this hospital's operations from the ground up. That makes me exactly the kind of person qualified to offer professional opinions." Janet's face flushed red. "We'll see how long this fancy promotion lasts. Mark my words, you'll be back here cleaning toilets before the year is out." "Maybe," Maria said peacefully. "But if I am, it won't be because I'm not qualified for something better. And it certainly won't be because I'm not worthy of respect and dignity in whatever job I'm doing." As Maria finished her last shift in housekeeping, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had entered the hospital 18 months ago as a woman struggling to find her place in the civilian world, taking whatever work she could find to survive. She had endured being overlooked, undervalued, and treated as invisible. But throughout it all, she had maintained her integrity, her work ethic, and her commitment to serving others, the same qualities that had defined her military service. And finally, someone with the authority to make a difference had noticed not just the work she was doing, but who she really was. Maria Santos was no longer just the woman who cleaned toilets. She was a veteran, a leader, and a valuable member of the hospital community whose voice would now be heard and whose contributions would be recognized. Her Purple Heart ring had always been a symbol of her service and sacrifice. Now it was also a symbol of her resilience, her worth, and her bright future. The general had noticed her ring, but, more importantly, the general had seen the character and capability it represented. And that recognition had changed everything.